They called it the Erebus Nexus, a swirling vortex of psychic terror that consumed any ship foolish enough to venture near. The Galactic Alliance lost countless expeditions trying to unravel its mysteries before quarantining the region, declaring it off-limits to all. But when billionaire industrialist Adam Scott acquired the sector and built a resort on the Nexus's edge, he marketed it as the ultimate thrill, Elysium Station, where the ultra-wealthy could dance with madness. The station's opening gala drew elite clientele from across known space, eager to sample a curated brush with insanity. But not all were content to sip cocktails while courting oblivion. Tellarite business mogul Belos booked a suite, secretly aiming to expose Elysium as a death trap waiting to snap shut. Immune to telepathy, he planned to find proof of the resort's dangers and force its closure before tragedy struck. Yet what Belos discovered eclipsed his worst fears. Beneath Elysium Station's opulent trappings, nightmare visions crept in, subtle at first, rapidly escalating into full-blown psychic assaults. Guests suffered hellish hallucinations, staff were subsumed by sinister entities, and reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. As Belos peeled back layer after disturbing layer, he began to suspect the resort was a front for something far more malevolent than reckless tourism. While accidents multiplied and unnatural phenomena ran rampant, the Galactic Alliance quietly dispatched Agent Kira Soren to investigate the resort undercover. Her mission: assess the station's threat to galactic safety and sanity. But with each inexplicable incident, her dread grew. Adam Scott clearly intended more than selling expensive thrills to sensation-seeking elites. An unspeakable truth lay coiled within the heart of the Erebus Nexus, a revelation that could shatter the galaxy forever if unleashed. As unnerving incidents multiplied aboard Elysium Station, Adam Scott scrambled to maintain control and reassure increasingly skittish guests and investors. He called upon Dr. Evelyn Sato, the galaxy's foremost expert on psionics, to investigate the anomalies and develop countermeasures. Dr. Sato strode through the opulent atrium, her heels clicking on the polished marble. She paused, closing her eyes and extending her senses. The raw psionic energy emanating from the Erebus Nexus buffeted her mind like a psychic gale, far stronger than anything she'd encountered before. She furrowed her brow. The resort's construction had somehow destabilized the ancient maelstrom, causing it to leak into real space with unpredictable and terrifying effects. Kyra, posing as a wealthy socialite, sipped a cocktail by the window, watching in horror as a well-dressed man suddenly went berserk, smashing a sculpture and attacking other patrons with seemingly superhuman strength. Station security rushed in, grappling the flailing man to the floor as he screamed incoherently. Kira studied the scene with a trained eye. The man had no prior history of violence. Something was very wrong here. A sickening lurch rippled through the station. Kira grabbed a railing as the hull beside her shimmered and phased out of existence, the Cerulean Nebula suddenly visible through the breach. Screams filled the atrium as guests were pulled towards the rupture before it snapped back into place seconds later, leaving no trace. Kira gaped at the readings on her covert scanner, exotic matter residue and space-time microfractures. What the hell was happening? Deep beneath the resort, Belos crept through a concealed sublevel, his eyes widening at the illegal sci-tech laboratory hidden there. Cages held creatures both sapient and bestial, wired into arcane devices. Scientists in anonymous clean suits experimented on glowing artifacts pulled from the churning Nexus, heedless of the subject's agony. Belos realized the horrific truth. Adam Scott was secretly trying to weaponize the anomaly's power. An alarm shrieked and a voice boomed, "Intruder detected in sub-level 6. Belos sprinted for the exit, narrowly dodging a crackling force bolt. He escaped into a maintenance shaft, gasping as the pieces fell into place. Scott was experimenting on guests, staff, aliens, all to increase his control over the Nexus at any expense. Belos made a frantic call to Kira and Dr. Sato. "We need to stop this madness before it's too late. Scott's going to destabilize the anomaly further. If that psychic hellstorm fully merges with reality, it could drive entire worlds insane." Kira clenched her jaw. "We need proof to alert the authorities, and we need to move fast. I'm already seeing signs that the Maelstrom's influence is spreading more rapidly than we thought possible. Dr. Sato paled as her psionic senses screamed a warning. Oh gods! A coronal mass ejection just slammed into the weakened psychic barrier around the Nexus. The impact is sending a tsunami of psionic energy cascading across local spacetime. It's going to hit the station any... A clap of unthunder shook Elysium Station. Kira stumbled as gravity fluctuated wildly. The air crackled with ozone and unreality. Guests collapsed, clutching their heads and screaming as their darkest traumas took on horrific physical form. A wave of primal terror and madness swept the decks. In the chaos, Kira glimpsed Adam Scott standing at the heart of the disturbance, arms outstretched, face twisted in ecstasy as the otherworldly energies coursed through him. His eyes blazed with eldritch light and his flesh shimmered, transforming him into something utterly inhuman. The man drank in the suffering and fear, reveling in his newfound power, even as the unleashed horrors of guests' psyches rampaged through the once opulent halls. And deep within the raging maelstrom of the Erebus Nexus, an ancient malevolent intelligence stirred, drawn inexorably to the sudden influx of psionic energy and human anguish. The entity saw a chance to break free from its timeless prison and set its baleful will upon the station. Elysium, already poised on the edge of apocalypse, now faced an even more dire and unspeakable threat. The psychic shockwave rippled through Elysium Station, warping reality in its wake. Kira stumbled as the floor beneath her feet liquefied, then solidified in rapid succession. Screams echoed from every direction as guests succumbed to their worst nightmares made manifest. Through the chaos, a new presence made itself known. An ancient malevolence, awakened from eons of slumber, reached out with tendrils of pure thought. Kira felt it probing her mind, searching for weaknesses to exploit. The Ethon, Dr. Sato gasped, her face ashen. It's free. Belos gripped the scientist's arm. What is this thing? Before she could answer, a thunderous voice boomed inside their skulls. I am the end of all things. I am your new god. The trio reeled from the psychic assault. Kira's training kicked in, and she erected mental barriers against the intrusion. We need to move, she urged, pulling her companions towards the nearest emergency hatch. As they raced through Elysium's twisting corridors, they encountered Captain Luca Valdez, leading a group of terrified civilians. The burly security chief's uniform was torn and bloodied, his eyes wild with terrifying panic. This way, Valdez shouted, gesturing towards an evacuation point. We need to get these people off the station. Kira caught his arm as he passed. Captain, we need your help. Adam Scott is behind this. He's working with the entity. Valdez's face hardened. I should have known. That bastard's been acting strange for weeks. He turned to his second in command. Jensen, get these people to the escape pods. I'm going with them. As they fought their way through the pandemonium, Kira witnessed the full horror of the Ethon's influence. Station security officers turned on each other, their eyes glowing with unearthly light. Guests clawed at their own flesh, desperate to escape the horrors only they could see. They reached Scott's private quarters to find the door already blown off its hinges. Inside, the industrialist stood at the center of a maelstrom of psionic energy, his body pulsing with otherworldly power. Scott! Belos bellowed. What have you done? The man who had once been Adam Scott turned, his eyes twin pools of swirling darkness. When he spoke, his voice resonated with inhuman frequencies. I have ascended. The Ethon has shown me the truth of existence. Soon, all will bow before us. Dr. Sato stepped forward, her hands raised placatingly. Adam, please. The Ethon is using you. This isn't ascension, it's possession. Fight it. Scott's face contorted in rage. He lashed out with a bolt of pure thought, sending Dr. Sato flying across the room. Kyra and Valdez opened fire, but their weapons had no effect on Scott's psionic shield. As the battle raged, Belos noticed a control panel hidden behind a false wall. He lunged for it, fingers flying over the interface. A shimmering field sprang to life around Scott, cutting him off from the Ethon's influence. Scott howled in fury and pain as the connection was severed. He collapsed to the floor, convulsing. Kira rushed to restrain him, slapping psi-dampening cuffs around his wrists. But their victory was short-lived. The station shuddered violently, and a deep, otherworldly howl reverberated through the hull. Through the viewport, they watched in horror as a colossal form began to coalesce from the swirling energies of the Erebus Nexus. "It's manifesting," Dr. Sato whispered, her voice filled with dread. "The Ethon is taking physical form." Valdez's comm crackled to life. "Captain, we've lost control of the main reactor. Power levels are spiking off the charts." Dr. Sato's eyes widened. "The reactor? That's it. If we overload it, the electromagnetic pulse could disrupt the Ethon's energy matrix. It might be our only chance to stop it." Kira met the scientist's gaze, understanding the implication. "But that would destroy the station. Everyone's still on board." "We don't have a choice," Valdez growled. "If that thing gets loose, it'll enslave entire worlds." As they debated, the Ethon's avatar loomed ever larger outside the station. Its vast alien consciousness pressed down on them, promising eternal torment if they dared to resist. Time was running out. They had to decide, sacrifice the few to save the many, or risk the subjugation of all life in the galaxy. With the weight of untold billions of lives on their shoulders, Kira, Belos, Dr. Sato, and Captain Valdez steeled themselves to make an impossible choice. "We can't just sacrifice everyone," Captain Valdez shouted, his face contorted with anguish. "There are still civilians trapped on board." Kira's eyes flashed. "If we don't stop the Ethon now, billions will suffer far worse fates." Belos paced, his alien features twisted in concentration. "As much as it pains me to say it, Agent Soren is right. The galactic implications are too severe to ignore." Dr. Sato raised her hand, silencing the argument. "There might be another way." She turned to the writhing form of Adam Scott, still bound by psi-dampening cuffs. "We need to negotiate." The scientist closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind. Scott's body convulsed, his eyes snapping open to reveal swirling voids of darkness. When he spoke, the voice was a cacophony of alien frequencies. "You dare to bargain with a god?" Dr. Sato stood her ground. "If you truly seek godhood, why start with destruction? Wouldn't it be more fitting to cultivate worshippers?" For a moment, the entity seemed to consider her words. Then Scott's face split into an inhuman grin. "Submit. Become my first disciples. I will spare your lives." "And if we refuse?" Kira asked, her hand inching towards her weapon. The Ethon's response came in a surge of psychic energy that slammed them against the walls. Scott's body rose, crackling with eldritch power. "Then you will suffer." Chaos erupted, the station's corridors filled with the screams of possessed crew members and guests, their minds shattered by the entity's influence. Captain Valdez barked orders into his comm as his security team engaged the oncoming horde. "We need to reach the reactor," Dr. Sato yelled over the din of battle. "It's our only chance." They fought their way through twisting hallways, reality itself buckling under the strain of the Ethon's manifestation. Possessed attackers wielded makeshift weapons imbued with psychic energy, each blow threatening to shatter minds as well as bodies. Valdez's men fell one by one, their screams of agony cut short by Scott's cruel laughter. The industrialist appeared before them, his form flickering between human and something utterly alien. "Your minds are an open book to me," Scott taunted, gesturing lazily. A security officer's head exploded in a spray of gore. As Scott turned his attention to Belos, Dr. Sato made her move. She lunged for an exposed control panel, fingers flying across the interface. Warning klaxons blared as she overrode the reactor's failsafes. "No!" Belos cried, realizing her intent too late. A blinding flash engulfed Dr. Sato as she channeled the reactor's energy. The burst struck Scott, his body disintegrating with an unearthly shriek. The station shuddered violently, alarms screaming of imminent core breach. "We have minutes before this place blows!" Kira shouted, steadying herself against a buckling wall. Captain Valdez's face was grim. "Get to the evacuation pods. I'll round up any survivors I can find." "There's no time," Belos argued. "Our only chance is Scott's lab. The experimental gear might let us survive long enough to finish this." Kira nodded, her expression hardening. "Lead the way." They raced deeper into the dying station, dodging debris and pockets of warped spacetime. Scott's hidden laboratory was a nightmare of alien tech and half-finished horrors. Belos donned a hulking suit covered in pulsing inhibitors, while Kira hefted an angular rifle that hummed with barely contained power. The Terminus Lancer, Belos explained, it can pierce dimensional barriers, but the energy drain— I'll make it count, Kira said grimly. They sprinted for a waiting shuttle as the station tore itself apart around them. The craft lurched into the swirling maelstrom of the Erebus Nexus, buffeted by screaming winds of psychic energy. The Ethon's vast form coalesced before them, a writhing mass of impossible geometries and hungering void. Blasts of world-shattering force slammed against the shuttle's shields. "Brace yourself!" Belos shouted as Kira took aim with the Terminus Lancer. "This is going to get rough." Rough! The shuttle lurched violently as Kira fired the Terminus Lancer. A beam of searing energy lanced out, tearing a ragged hole in the fabric of reality. The Ethon's vast form shuddered, its impossible geometry distorting as the weapon's energies disrupted its psionic matrix. Belos grunted, his alien features contorted with strain as he wrestled with the shuttle's controls. "We can't take much more of this." As if in response, a wave of psychic force slammed into their craft. Alarms blared as systems overloaded. Kira's mind reeled from the telepathic assault, her training barely holding back the tide of alien thoughts seeking to overwhelm her consciousness. "Ejecting!" she shouted, slamming her palm against a glowing panel. The shuttle's hull split open, and Kira found herself hurtling through the maelstrom in an armored pod. The Terminus Lancer hummed in her grip, its energy output now her only means of propulsion. Through the pod's view screen, she caught a glimpse of Belos's shuttle veering off, trailing debris as it arced around the Nexus's outer edges. Small objects detached from the craft. Drones, she realized, deployed to map the swirling chaos. Kira had no time to dwell on her companion's fate. The pod spun wildly, buffeted by currents of raw psionic energy. She fired the Lancer in short bursts, each shot carving localized singularities that disrupted the Ethon's attempts to crush her. Reality itself seemed to flex and warp around her. One moment she was falling through an endless void of swirling colors. The next, nightmarish landscapes flashed by. Alien worlds glimpsed through tears in spacetime. A massive tendril of psionic energy lashed out, missing the pod by mere inches. Kira's stomach lurched as she plummeted through layers of fluctuating dimensions. She squeezed the Lancer's trigger, not aiming so much as willing it to clear a path. Suddenly, the chaos fell away. Kira found herself suspended in an eerie calm, the eye of the cosmic storm. And there, at the heart of the Nexus, the Ethon's true form coalesced. It defied description, a writhing mass of pure thought and alien consciousness. Kira felt its attention focus on her, an immense pressure threatening to crush her very identity. The Gestalt intelligence reached out, seeking to absorb her mind into its collective. With clarity born of desperation, Kira raised the Terminus Lancer. She poured every ounce of her will into the weapon, feeling it resonate with her own purpose. The barrel glowed white-hot as she fired directly into the Ethon's psionic core. The entity's psychic scream tore through her mind. Kira's vision blurred, blood trickling from her nose as she fought to maintain her sense of self against the onslaught. Through the haze of pain, she glimpsed Belos's shuttle streaking towards them. It had slingshotted around the Nexus, guided by the mapping drone's calculations. The craft's deflector shields sparked and failed as it plunged into a swirling vortex of chrono energy. The resulting detonation sent shockwaves rippling through the very fabric of spacetime. The Ethon's form destabilized, fragments of its consciousness scattering across dimensions. A final telepathic howl of rage and terror washed over Kira as the Nexus began to collapse. She found herself adrift in a sea of untethered realities. Shards of memory and identity swirled around her. Were they her own, or echoes of the shattered Ethon? Kira struggled to hold on to herself as the maelstrom threatened to tear her apart at the most fundamental level. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of Belos. His psi-nullifying armor sparked and flickered as he fought against the same cosmic forces threatening to unmake them both. Their eyes met across the impossible distance, a shared understanding passing between them. To survive, they would have to push through to the dissipating core where the Ethon had been. But to reach it meant facing the horrors lurking in the depths of their own psyches, nightmares given form by the collapsing Nexus. Kira steeled herself, tightening her grip on the Terminus Lancer. As reality fractured around her, she began the perilous journey towards the eye of the storm and the reckoning that awaited her there. Kyra's pod spun wildly as she punched through the churning vortex. The Terminus Lancer glowed white-hot in her hands, carving temporary tunnels through the fabric of reality. Each blast tore open a fleeting path, only for it to collapse moments later in a kaleidoscope of fractured space-time. "Belos!" she shouted into her comm, fighting to be heard over the cacophony of dimensional collapse. "We need to converge on the epicenter." Static crackled, then Belos's strained voice came through. "Deploying SI resonance drones now. They'll map the energy flows. Guide us in." Kira glimpsed flashes of his craft, tumbling through impossible geometries as swarms of silvery drones fanned out around it. The machines pulsed with eerie light, somehow tracking the surges of chrono energy that defied conventional physics. A massive tendril of psionic force lashed out, missing Kira's pod by millimeters. The near miss sent her spinning, and for a sickening moment, she lost all sense of direction in the maelstrom. Then her training kicked in. She steadied her breath, focused her mind, and fired the Lancer in a tight spiral pattern. The singularities she created acted as temporary anchor points, allowing her to reorient. As she stabilized, a flood of alien imagery assaulted her consciousness. The dying Ethon bombarded her with fragments of shattered realities, each more horrific than the last. Kira saw worlds burning, civilizations crumbling to dust. She relived the moment of the Proxima Centauri massacre, helpless as billions died in an instant. The weight of that failure threatened to crush her very soul. "It's not real," she growled through gritted teeth. "Focus, cut through it." With monumental effort, Kira wrenched her mind free of the psychic onslaught. She brought the Lancer to bear once more, aiming for the swirling heart of the vortex where reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. Belos's voice crackled over the comm again, tight with strain. "The drones have mapped a path. Sending coordinates now. We'll have one shot at this." Kira's display lit up with a dizzying array of vectors and energy patterns. She input the data into her pod's nav system, praying the rickety craft could withstand the stress of what came next. As one, she and Belos accelerated towards the Nexus core. Their pods shuddered, buffeted by waves of unraveling space-time. Kira's teeth rattled in her skull as dimensional shear threatened to tear her apart at the atomic level. They plunged deeper, surrounded now by nightmarish visions given form. Kira saw twisted versions of herself, echoes of paths not taken and choices unmade. She forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the rapidly closing distance to their target. Belos's scream of agony cut through the comm channel. My mind! It's stripping away everything!" "Hold on!" Kira shouted back. "We're almost there!" They burst through a final barrier of warped reality into a deceptively calm eye of the storm. Here, at the very heart of the Erebus Nexus, the Ethon's true form awaited them, a writhing mass of pure thought and alien consciousness. Kira raised the Terminus Lancer, feeling it resonate with her very being. Beside her, Belos's craft hummed with building energy as his drones swarmed around the Ethon's core. "Now!" Belos cried. Kira squeezed the trigger, unleashing the full fury of the Lancer. At the same instant, Belos's drones detonated in a cascade of psionic feedback. Their combined assault tore into the Ethon's matrix, shredding dimensional anchors and unraveling the cosmic tapestry that held it together. A psychic scream of unfathomable anguish erupted from the dying entity. Kira felt her own identity begin to fray at the edges as reality itself convulsed around them. The Ethon's death throes sent shockwaves rippling through the multiverse. Kyra's pod disintegrated, leaving her exposed to the full fury of the collapsing Nexus. She caught a final glimpse of Belos, his craft similarly torn asunder. Then the singularity took hold, and Kira felt herself being pulled apart at the quantum level. Her consciousness fragmented, scattering across infinite realities. In that moment of ultimate dissolution, Kira experienced the totality of existence, past, present, and futures that might never come to be. She was everywhere and nowhere, stretched across the cosmos in a state beyond human comprehension. And still, some fragment of her being clung desperately to the memory of who she was, refusing to be wholly consumed by the vast expanse of the multiverse. Kira's consciousness shattered into countless fragments, each a sliver of her identity scattered across the quantum foam of reality. She experienced a kaleidoscope of existence simultaneously, every possible version of herself, every choice made and unmade, every triumph and failure. In one fractured reality, she relived the Proxima Centauri massacre in excruciating detail. The screams of billions echoed through her psyche as she watched helplessly, unable to alter the course of events. In another, she saw herself as a child, cowering from her father's drunken rage. The pain and fear felt as real and immediate as it had decades ago. Kira's training as an operative became her lifeline. She clung to the mental disciplines that had been ingrained into her very being. With monumental effort, she began to gather the scattered pieces of herself, pulling them back together like a quantum jigsaw puzzle. Nearby, Belos's essence underwent its own harrowing ordeal. His mercenary defenses crumbled in the face of cosmic chaos, yet his psi-null nature, once a liability, now became his salvation. In the swirling maelstrom of realities, Belos's blank psychic signature stood out like a beacon. He latched onto that emptiness, rebuilding his identity around an unshakable core of pure will. As Kira and Belos fought to reconstitute themselves, their quantum signatures pulsed across the dimensional ether. Far away, on a Rendarian silo station, hyper-advanced sensors detected the faint echoes of their existence. "Contact!" a cyborg technician called out, her voice a mix of organic vocalization and synthesized tones. Two distinct waveform patterns detected in the Nexus debris field. The station's hybrid AI swung into action, deploying experimental soliton wave tethers. These tendrils of pure energy reached across reality itself, latching onto the scattered essences of Kira and Belos. Inside a massive stasis chamber, swirling motes of light began to coalesce. Molecule by molecule, atom by atom, the physical forms of the two survivors took shape. Kira's body materialized first, her features etched with lines of strain, even in unconsciousness. Beside her, Belos's alien physiology slowly reconstructed itself. Alarms blared throughout the station. A Rendarian scientist, more machine than organic, studied a holographic display with growing concern. "The Nexus implosion has destabilized local spacetime," he reported. "Dark energy levels are spiking exponentially. We're detecting system-wide failures across multiple sectors." On the main view screen, entire star systems winked out of existence, consumed by the spreading anomaly. The Galactic Concord's interdiction fleet appeared as tiny points of light, frantically evacuating worlds in the path of destruction. Inside the stasis chamber, Kira's eyes snapped open. She gasped, her newly formed lungs filling with recycled air. Her perception swam, overlapping realities threatening to overwhelm her. "Hold steady," a calm voice instructed. A Rendarian medic loomed over her, multiple cybernetic arms adjusting equipment. "Your quantum matrix is still stabilizing." Kira tried to speak, but her vocal cords refused to cooperate. She turned her head, seeing Belos on an adjacent platform. His body twitched and convulsed as his psi-null nature fluctuated wildly. A violent tremor shook the station. Warning klaxons intensified as reality itself seemed to warp around them. "Quantum rifts detected," someone shouted. "The station's structural integrity is failing." Kira felt a surge of something coursing through her reconstructed body. It was as if she could sense the very fabric of space-time unraveling around them. Without conscious thought, she reached out with her mind, grasping at the quantum threads of reality. Beside her, Belos's eyes snapped open. His gaze met Kira's, and in that instant, a connection formed between them. Together they projected a stabilizing field, a bubble of coherent space-time amid the chaos. The Rendarian medic stared in awe as the two patients, still connected to life support, somehow held back the tide of quantum dissolution. Impossible, she whispered. But Kira and Belos were already slipping away, their newly forged consciousnesses unable to maintain corporeal form. As the station shuddered and began to break apart, emergency protocols engaged. Kyra felt herself being drawn into a crystalline matrix, her very essence encoded into quantum data. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Belos, his form dissolving into streams of information alongside her own. They were being preserved, she realized, saved for a future they couldn't yet imagine. As her awareness faded, Kira wondered what strange new reality would await them when they finally awoke. The quantum data streams containing Kira and Belos's essences flowed through subspace conduits, racing ahead of the expanding wave of destruction. As entire star systems blinked out of existence behind them, their encoded consciousness patterns arrived at a heavily shielded Rendarian data haven. Years passed in an eye blink for the disembodied duo. In the physical realm, teams of hyper-engineers worked tirelessly, their augmented minds interfacing directly with the quantum manifolds that held the fragmented remains of Kira and Belos. "Extraction complete," announced a Rendarian scientist, her voice a blend of organic and synthetic tones, initiating virtual chronotopological manifold. In the blink of an eye, Kira found herself standing on an impossibly vast plane of fractured light. The horizon stretched endlessly in all directions, reality itself seeming to bend and warp at the edges of her perception. "Belos?" she called out, her voice echoing strangely in the virtual space. A familiar figure materialized beside her, his form flickering and unstable. "I'm here," Belos replied, his words distorted as if spoken through layers of static. "But something's wrong. I can feel myself unraveling." Kira reached out to steady him, only to see her own hand pass through his shoulder like smoke. She looked down at herself, realizing her own body was little more than a holographic projection, edges blurring and shifting constantly. Suddenly, the world around them shattered. They found themselves plummeting through a maelstrom of memories and alternate realities. Kira saw herself as a child, cowering from her father's rage. Then she was on Proxima Centauri, watching helplessly as billions died. In another flash, she stood triumphant over conquered worlds, her hands stained with the blood of countless innocents. "No!" Kira shouted, forcing her fragmented consciousness to focus. "These aren't real. They're echoes, possibilities, nothing more." She concentrated, visualizing herself as a singular entity. Slowly, painfully, she began to pull the scattered pieces of her identity back together. Each memory, each potential version of herself, was examined and either accepted or discarded. Beside her, Belos fought his own battle. The psi-null void at his core threatened to consume him entirely. Yet as he teetered on the brink of oblivion, he found an unexpected strength in that emptiness. "I am the absence," Belos intoned, his form condensing into a singularity of pure non-existence. "I am the silence between thoughts, the space between stars." As they struggled to redefine themselves, the virtual landscape shifted once more. Kyra and Belos found themselves standing amid the ruins of Elysium Station. The air crackled with psionic energy, reality itself seeming to fray at the edges. "We have to stabilize the matrix," Kira realized, her newly refined senses attuned to the ebb and flow of the simulation. "If we don't, we'll never make it back to the physical world." Belos nodded, extending his hands. Waves of nullifying energy radiated from his palms, pushing back against the chaos threatening to overwhelm them. Kira joined him, reaching out with her expanded perceptions to weave a tapestry of coherent space-time around them. As they worked in tandem, the simulation began to stabilize. The fractured landscape coalesced into a recognizable form, the command center of Elysium Station in its final moments before destruction. "Integration complete," a disembodied voice announced, preparing for biological reconstruction. The virtual world faded away, replaced by a sensation of warmth and pressure. Kyra felt herself being drawn into a new form, molecules and atoms arranging themselves according to some vast, unseen plan. When she opened her eyes, she found herself floating in a nutrient-rich suspension. Through the curved walls of a cloning tank, She saw a lab filled with advanced medical equipment. Beside her, in an identical tank, Belos stirred to consciousness. A team of Rendarian scientists gathered around them, expressions of triumph and relief evident on their cybernetically enhanced faces. As the tanks began to drain, Kira flexed her new fingers, marveling at the familiar yet strange sensations coursing through her body. She could feel the difference immediately. Her senses extended beyond the physical, allowing her to perceive faint echoes of other realities brushing against their own. Belos, for his part, radiated an aura of metaphysical censorship, a localized dead zone in the fabric of space-time itself. As they were helped from the tanks and underwent a battery of tests, Kyra caught snippets of conversation from the Rendarian team. Psi-Strike operatives of unprecedented capability, vital to countering the rising anomalies, but Galactic Concord's first line of defense. Kyra met Belos's eyes, seeing her own mix of perseverance and uncertainty reflected there. They had survived the impossible, been reborn into a changed universe. Now, it seemed, the real work was about to begin. Their new forms hummed with potential, senses extending beyond the physical realm. Kyra flexed her fingers, marveling at the way reality seemed to ripple around them. She could perceive faint echoes of alternate timelines, quantum probabilities dancing at the edges of her consciousness. Beside her, Belos radiated an aura of metaphysical silence, a localized dead zone in the fabric of space-time itself. Operative Kira, Operative Belos, a stern voice cut through their wonder. Admiral Venn, newly appointed head of the Galactic Concord's PsyOps division, strode into the lab. Your integration period is over. We have a situation in the Zytron drift that requires your unique capabilities. Kira nodded, her enhanced senses already picking up flashes of distress from that distant sector. What are we dealing with, Admiral? Venn's cybernetic eye whirred as he brought up a holographic display. Arcturian's separatist mining colony. They've experienced severe reality destabilization since the Erebus implosion. Entire sections of their facility are phasing in and out of existence. Belos frowned, his nullification field intensifying unconsciously. That level of dimensional flux should be impossible without a major catalyst. Precisely, Venn agreed. Your mission is to investigate the source and neutralize any extra-dimensional threats. You'll be inserted covertly. The Arcturians are notoriously suspicious of Concord interference. Within hours, Kira and Belos found themselves on the outskirts of New Arcturus, the main settlement of the troubled mining colony. The air itself felt wrong, charged with an otherworldly static that set Kira's enhanced nerves on edge. You feel it too? Belos murmured, his eyes scanning the distorted horizon. Kira nodded. It's like reality is fraying at the seams, but there's something else. A presence, malevolent, hungry. They made their way through the colony's twisting corridors, posing as independent contractors. Kyra's expanded perceptions allowed her to navigate the unstable terrain, sensing impending phase shifts before they occurred. Belos's nullification field proved equally vital, anchoring them in normal space-time when reality threatened to slip away entirely. In the depths of the primary excavation site, they found their first real clue. A miner, wild-eyed and babbling, clutched at Kira's arm. The hive, he rasped. It speaks. It changes us. We are becoming... His words cut off as his body began to twist, flesh warping and bubbling. Kira recoiled, her expanded senses overwhelmed by the psychic onslaught emanating from the man's corrupted form. Belos stepped forward, his nullification field snapping into place like a shield. The miner's transformation halted, his body frozen in mid-mutation. But the damage was done. Through the translucent, half-formed carapace, Kira could see the man's consciousness fading, subsumed by something vast and alien. Parallax, Belos growled, recognition and dread mingling in his voice. We need to contact the Concord, now. But it was already too late. Alarms blared throughout the facility as reality itself seemed to shudder. Kira's enhanced perceptions reeled as waves of corrupted space-time washed over them. The parallax was here in force, and the battle for the very fabric of existence had begun. Kira reached out with her mind, trying to grasp the extent of the infestation. What she found chilled her to her core. The Parallax Hive wasn't just infecting individual minds, it was assimilating entire pockets of reality, spinning them off into nightmarish subdimensions. "We need to find the source," she shouted to Belos, over the cacophony of twisting metal and warping space. "There has to be a central nexus, a point where it's anchored to our reality." Belos nodded grimly, his nullification field expanding to create a bubble of stable space-time around them. Together they plunged deeper into the corrupted heart of the mining colony, racing against time as the very foundations of reality crumbled around them. The Parallax's influence grew stronger with each step. Kira could feel it probing at the edges of her consciousness, seeking a way past her mental defenses. Belos's presence became her lifeline, his psionics censoring, keeping the worst of the psychic assault at bay. They found what they were looking for in a massive cavern, deep beneath the planet's surface. A writhing mass of interdimensional matter pulsed at the center, tendrils of corrupted space-time radiating outward. The Parallax Prime Overmind, the nexus of the Hive's consciousness, had made its lair here. As they approached, the entity's awareness turned toward them. Kira felt the weight of countless alien minds pressing down upon her, threatening to crush her very sense of self. Belos staggered, his nullification field flickering under the onslaught. "Now, Kira," he shouted, reaching for the specialized anti-psionic ordnance they'd brought. "I'll hold it back. You have to sever its connection." Kira nodded, steeling herself for what came next. She reached out with her mind, projecting her consciousness beyond the confines of her physical form. As Belos deployed his weapons, creating a momentary weakness in the Parallax's defenses, Kira plunged into the heart of the alien overmind. What followed was a battle beyond the comprehension of ordinary minds. Kira grappled with the Parallax Prime on a metaphysical level, their conflict spanning multiple dimensions and probable realities. She saw the entity's grand design, a vision of perfect order imposed across all of existence, entropy itself brought to heel. But Kira also saw the cost. Countless worlds, countless minds, all subsumed into the Parallax's single, monolithic consciousness. Free will, creativity, the very spark of individual existence, all would be snuffed out in the name of cosmic stability. "No," Kira growled, drawing upon depths of strength she never knew she possessed. She pushed back against the Parallax's influence, her human spirit burning bright against the cosmic void. In that moment of defiance, something shifted. The Parallax's grip on reality faltered, and Kira seized her chance. With a final, titanic effort, she severed the entity's connection to its transdimensional anchor matrix. The backlash was immediate and catastrophic. Reality itself began to unravel around them as the Parallax's influence collapsed. Kira felt herself being pulled back into her physical body, Belos's strong arms steadying her as the cavern shook itself apart. "We have to go," he urged, his voice tight with strain as he struggled to maintain their protective field. "This entire sector is destabilizing." As they raced back to the surface, dodging pockets of warped space-time and fleeing colonists, Kyra's expanded senses picked up the approaching Concorde evacuation fleet. But she also felt the growing instability, the terminal flaw that their battle had rent in the very fabric of this reality. They barely made it to the last transport, the ground literally disappearing beneath their feet as they leapt aboard. As the ship accelerated away from the doomed Zytron drift, Kira watched in horror as an entire region of space folded in upon itself, vanishing into an interdimensional vortex. The Parallax threat had been neutralized, but at a terrible cost. As the shock waves of the collapse spread outward, threatening to destabilize neighboring sectors, Kira knew their fight was not nearly finished. The boundaries between realities had been weakened, and there was no telling what other horrors might now find their way into our universe. Belos placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her in the here and now. "We'll face whatever comes next," he said quietly. "Together." Kira nodded, her determination hardening. Whatever cosmic threats awaited them, whatever battles lay ahead, they would meet them head-on. The fate of reality itself hung in the balance, and they were now the first and last line of defense against the chaos of the multiverse. The transport ship docked at Concord Command, its hull still vibrating from the shockwaves of the collapsed Zytron drift. Kira and Belos disembarked, their enhanced bodies bearing the invisible scars of their metaphysical battle. Admiral Ven met them at the airlock, his cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned their vital signs. "We need you in the briefing room, now." They followed him through sterile corridors, passing grim-faced officers and technicians. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread permeating the station. In the briefing room, holographic displays flickered to life, painting the air with images of cosmic horror. Kira's enhanced senses recoiled at the sight of entire realities being consumed, reduced to discordant echoes. "The parallax was just the beginning," Ven stated, his voice heavy. "We're facing an existential threat beyond anything we've encountered." Kira studied the containment images, her mind struggling to process the scale of devastation. These entities, they're older than time itself. Belos nodded, his nullification field instinctively flaring. "And they see our universe as nothing more than fuel for their cosmic hunger." The briefing continued, each revelation more terrifying than the last. Kira found herself proposing a desperate plan, leveraging the entropic shear zones left by the Erebus implosion as trans-dimensional firebreaks. Belos, his face a mask of steadfast perseverance, suggested an even more drastic measure. "We could use anihotherium isostatics to create reality ruptures, containment zones on a cosmic scale." The room erupted into heated debate. Kira watched as fractures formed among the leadership, some arguing for restraint while others pushed for increasingly extreme measures. Before a consensus could be reached, alarms blared throughout the station. A technician burst into the room, face pale. "The lattice quarantine zone is under attack. Unknown mimetic incursion." Ven turned to Kira and Belos. "You're our best chance, go." They raced to the deployment bay, their enhanced bodies primed for action. As they boarded a quantum shift vessel, Kira felt a chill run down her spine. The battle ahead would make their fight against the parallax seem like a mere skirmish. The ship tore through reality, depositing them at the edge of the lattice quarantine zone. The fabric of space-time writhed and buckled, assaulted by invasive memes that defied comprehension. Belos immediately went to work, his nullification field expanding to burn away corrupted data grids. Kira reached out with her mind, attempting to trace the source of the attack. The psychometric feedback hit her like a supernova. Images and concepts flooded her consciousness, a primordial realm where reality itself was defined by language, where abstract concepts were weaponized into cosmic malware. Kira staggered, her enhanced mind barely able to process the alien logic. "Belos," she gasped, "it's not just an attack, it's a rewrite of fundamental reality." He turned, his eyes widening as he saw the strain on her face. "We need to evacuate, now!" They barely made it back to their ship as the quarantine zone collapsed, entire sections of space-time overwritten into meaningless static. As they fled, Kira knew with grim certainty that this was only the beginning. The nameless entities from beyond reality were stirring, gathering in the shadows between dimensions, and Concord Command, for all its power and technology, might be woefully unprepared for the storm that was coming.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.